think it should be good.
I hope so. I gave Chris $30 to make this, so I hope it money well spent.
Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Bledos, and recently I had a falling out with a woman who I was very close with, and in the aftermath of that fallout, I made a quip in public about a standard she was professing was easy to uphold, in which I pointed out her hypocrisy by referencing one of the speed bumps in our clusterfuck of a relationship. And in response to me pointing out her hypocrisy, she publicly claimed that I was a sexual harasser, and then started messaging people in private, making claims that I was someone with whom she had never even flirted with, before eventually finding herself pitching my supposed misconduct to a large drama-hungry audience. Most of those present at the time seemed to realize through just her own retelling of events that the claims don't seem to hold up to her initial characterization, that her own explanations accompanying the evidence of my supposed misconduct that she offered up to the crowd only served to create some kind of vision of a messy relationship between us. It did do a lot of damage to me. I lost friends, mods. She attacked like my life in a bunch of different ways, very specifically. I've still felt that I needed to address things personally and directly, but I'm finally able to do so in a more detailed and structured way and directly here now. I wanted to set aside the clumsy and distressed, unstructured tone of my previous attempts to explain this. Mainly in the past, I'd tried to toe a particular line of not disclosing too much, if at all, any real information. I'd hoped that I could defend myself by addressing the character of her interactions, addressing how she had selectively re-problematized and misrepresented what had happened between us while leaving out a lot of private details. I was mistaken in that. I was hoping that a counter-narrative would suffice as a corrective to the reputational damage that she was trying to inflict, leaving me able to set aside the humiliating Pyrrhic expose that lays bare the sort of details of our private lives in service of exonerating me at the cost of someone who I still cared about a lot at the time. So I'll be addressing things here now, and hopefully it'll be the last time that I have to address this. It isn't just that I want to address it now because my consideration for her humiliation has waned, but it is mostly because there's been a lot of people who have been holdouts, and to varying degrees, those people have remained convinced by her bullshit, and they're continuing to push the story that she was telling for weeks since she was ousted for her other freakish behaviors and associations with strange people. There have been some people who have bought into her story so hard, or have clung to a single element, that they don't feel she fumbled badly enough in her telling of it, and they feel that they should be the one to make me apologize for my supposed misconduct. Or there are those who don't believe what transpired between me and her over the months could have possibly been anything more than a couple of sexually charged messages, and that I am merely completely delusional and hopeless and pathetic in my pursuing of her. People think that I'm being gaslit by anyone who hasn't completely written me off as a delusional schizophrenic, when the truth is that we did have a confusing and messy relationship, and it was one that she often refused to take accountability for her part in, both while we were still on speaking terms and, as you all saw, afterwards. This isn't to say that I have no part in it being messy and confusing. For my part, I didn't enforce the boundaries that I had laid out in the overt romantic and sexual phase, and those boundaries were meant to provide safety for us as that romantic and sexual phase came to a close, so that I could still protect a friendship that I did treasure at the time. And when we were still in the romantic phase, I often allowed for a continuation of a dynamic between us that I wasn't happy with, instead of advocating more strongly for my own needs or terminating the relationship altogether, especially when there were times that I thought, well, realized that things had become hopelessly, truly untenable, that the boundaries that I had set up to protect my own sensitivities were repeatedly being trampled on. For all of the accusations made about me violating her supposed boundaries, the truth is that throughout our relationship, it was my boundaries that were broken. The only boundary she ever even made clear was that she didn't want to associate with drug users. The thing that she claims was my transgressing of her boundary was her proclaiming a sensitivity to a mode of engagement that was already well established between us. And quite frankly, that mode of engagement is something that she is established with a lot of men in the community. She tried after the fact to claim that this was a boundary that had been crossed, but we'll tear into that a little bit later. And so, obviously, following on from my boundaries being broken, or when I have otherwise felt like I have been untreated fairly, there are times when I was angry about the way that I was being treated. And while I have no issues with the mere fact of my anger, I occasionally express that anger in terms that were totally and wholly unacceptable, for which I am truly sorry. But overwhelmingly, I stand by the way that I
Hey, apologize at least.
conducted myself, even if I regret how deeply messy the relationship was and how hurt I have felt at many points throughout it, especially at the end. My biggest mistakes were letting what turned out to be a rancid, unfixable, terminally validation-seeking e-whore and his deranged gooner of an attack dog taxi fill a void in my social life. Get fucked, Taxi and Rhea. You deserve each other.
The W intro. Amazing intro.
I miss Taxi. I wish he was back.
Yeah, unfortunate. Am I supposed to be reading all this? No, I'm too lazy.
I'm reading the line. It's crazy. Oh, man. Oh,
Try to fantasize my tongue on the head of your... Yikes, what is this? Will I stare into your eyes? Dawn of a New Day. The Zelda font? Okay. I'm not paying attention.
I'm locked in.
Can you kiss it better? Yeah, but gently. You're not even next to each other. What is this?
IH.
How about a gently kiss in the fur and spanking? What?
This is love. E-love.
This sound like it might work. Is she crazy? The Dawn of the Final Day? More Zelda? The Mario sounds of Minecraft. This is over dramatic. What the fucking...
This is very creative. I'm very impressed.
Just saying that is jobless, mentally ill behavior to believe that people on the internet with successful lives you can't even dream of are building a conspiracy against you.
They are sometimes, though.
Look, I'm not gonna argue with you guys, but he, as in her DMs, calling her a calling her and trying to force her to turn on her camera, told her he goons to her, voice and camera, asked her to watch. I'm good enough.
So, for that well-established boundary that I supposedly broke, that the remaining stragglers of her retarded simp army have insisted I need to apologise for. This is, also, presumably, what most of you think she meant when she first publicly talked of me sexually harassing her. The thing that she is referring to is what I've come to refer to as Goonagate. It is definitely what she ended up deciding was her best chance at fabricating a believable story to attack me with. Firstly, the guys clamouring for me to grovel for my transgressions, at the time, I did apologise. But perhaps I shouldn't have, because the thing I was apologising for and the thing I was admitting to was that I was taking her at her word when she said she felt a particular way at that time and that I had made her feel that way when I joked about how she usually got on camera, but not today. And so, I should pull up her Twitter feed because I wished I could have had her on my screen all the time. And later on she tells me that her response was to run to her workplace bathroom and to cry about it. I was trying to be the emotional caretaker for someone who said that they were upset by what was our normal mode of engagement, and that there were all of these things that she valued and held dear about not being sexualized, about how she had supposedly had a massive sensitivity to the sexualization of her digital images that should be well established, and how she laments the difficulty of finding friendship because everybody wants to fuck her. She talks about how she wouldn't have been upset 2 weeks ago in particular because she had been re-traumatized in a way that actually would have been completely fine and reasonable for her to be very legitimately upset about. But even that, which at the time I had no reason to doubt her feelings about, frankly, doesn't at all line up with the way that she was content to engage with me privately, nor does it line up with the way she interacted with the rest of you publicly, as you have now all seen. Which is why I say, perhaps I shouldn't have apologised. Because for the time period of weeks prior to that, she is claiming to be so traumatised by these sensitivities to images of her being sexualised that my comment has caused her to have a fucking meltdown. During this time, she is posting in Justicle's general chat about how fat her tits are, she's posting selfies, and she's continuing to post thirst traps. And I'm not saying she's not allowed to talk about how fat she thinks her tits are, that she's not allowed to post selfies, nor post thirst traps. I'm just saying that concocting this kind of fiction to browbeat me in private is actually fucking disgusting. She even claimed me and her had talked a few days ago about this, when the conversations that we had was her declaring repeatedly that she was asexual. And my pointing out that that doesn't line up with anything that anyone who has ever interacted with her has ever seen. It was especially nonsensical of her to say this to me, given that she had just told me how wet I was making her panties, how I had permission to use her as I wanted to, how she wanted her legs up and over my shoulders so I could pound on her G-spot, how my side of our pornographic writings to each other were exactly what she was imagining, and how my walls of horny text had her exclaiming that she didn't deserve me, how she was so enthralled by the notion of worshipping my dick and felt so strongly that she needed to tell me that she was using her phone behind the wheel to tell me how distracting my cock was for her. After these inconsistencies were pointed out, and I had a real conversation with her about whether or not she was asexual. She was pretty happy to fall back to our usual status quo of being friendly and flirty all the way up until Goonagate, that is. So now that we have addressed the freakish simps who either spent their weeks demanding I apologise or insisting that their sexting with Rhea was probably better than mine, they did this for weeks on end, the rest of you will be finally satisfied to the more common and widely asked question. Yes, me and Rhea were dating. I'll give you guys a quick chronological overlay of what happened. In March, I realised I needed to rebalance some of the parts of my life. Rhea was in my server, she was in my DMs, she was offering to come on my stream, and she would message me fairly often to tell me to come hang out with her. Basically every day this happened. There's a funny story about Spinboy in there, but we don't have time for that now. It didn't take long between us hanging out that Rhea asked what my real name was. Then she was asking if I'd ever been in an e-relationship and what it would take for me to get back close to someone like that. She baited this conversation multiple times. 3 of them take for me to get back close to someone like that. She baited this conversation multiple times. 3 of those times she was
Want to know your boundaries? Who talks like this?
hunting heavily, but she was wondering if me and Androida had been a couple. By April, she was asking me to be her trad boyfriend and stated she wanted a serious long-term relationship.
I date you? What? I wish I could take you on a date, like a big one. You deserve it. I date you. You're my future fiance.
She simply started referring to us as a couple. There were multiple instances of this happening. I, in response to that, set some pretty high boundaries for what it would take to be my girlfriend.
Okay, how do I talk to this guy who's like super interesting? Intimidating, like me letting out affection when I haven't in so long. Look, we both are going through it together. Because no one's ever called me kitten. Is this real?
Because I'm really sensitive about being taken advantage of. I'm kind of fragile, and she knew how much I liked her and how much that specifically worried me. The messages in these screenshots show me explaining to her that I'm only seriously interested because she is so affirmative. The messages in these screenshots show me explaining to her that I'm only seriously interested.
I think you're a really special person. I've not been there for the full details of how you started to change and work on yourself, but I've seen enough to feel pride.
Because she is so affirmatively asking what my boundaries are and then agreeing to overcome them. And that she's like very aware of how difficult it is for me to let her or anyone in emotionally. She is incredibly supportive. She finds out my sensitivities and she totally offers to like tolerate, deal with them, and to love me no matter what. At this point, there is like no real reason for me to not give myself the love that she is offering. She has understood all of my boundaries and offered to overcome them. From there on out, Rhea just escalated our flirting with basically no end in sight. She tells me that I can
I think you're really interesting and romantic and funny.
let other people know that we are together, and then she begins to publicly talk about how she is in a trad relationship and is off the
I'm not in the market anyway.
market.
I'm literally in a relationship.
And the screenshots that you can see now,
Oh,
a
shit.
Discord chatter and Justical server named Stasi is talking about different cultures and dating. Rhea makes a joke to him, appealing to her authority because she isn't on the market anymore. And in response to some teasing from Stasi, she clarifies that she is someone who wants to be in a traditional relationship and that she is currently in one. This is most likely because me and her have, for the past few weeks, been telling each other that we are committed to each other and looking forward to, as soon as possible, moving our online relationship to an IRL traditional one. She is also saying this right off the back of many, many messages such as this.
Doing really poorly. Call me sweetheart? You're in. Tell me you're gonna be sticking with me? You're gonna have to screw up for me to go anywhere? I'm happy being close to you and not leaving? Wait, what the fuck? Don't download Tinder and let me find it a day before my birthday? This dating stuff was serious, actually. And then he with another good girl? But it doesn't seem right? Feels really close and safe with you? I think you're a wonderful soul. Wow. And then this on the left. This overload. You're responsible for my heart malfunctioning. Haha, it would be worth flying you out? Adapting? I'm sorry from here until I will not be wearing pants 90% of the times? What is this? What is this? Oh my god, what is this? Dumping everything. I'm not gonna, yeah. I know what you want. What is this? What? I'm not reading
Kiss,
this.
kiss, kiss, kiss.
No, stop
Go to me.
it. Stop. Why do people do this? People do this. What? You had this guy in your DMs? You weren't saying anything? What? Share parts of stuff that you most enjoy? You can use me as you want to and you just replies immediately with this? Tapping your ankles to spread a wider? The what?
The niggas on block streets with the nasty.
No way, I gotta screenshot this. Wait, no, this is crazy. What is this? What is this? Is there anything? Jesus. Why are we saying this in the end? Why is this a thing? It's real life?
You have to phone the shit out.
Oh! Kinda wish I could taste your what? After worshiping your what? What? No, these are like, wait, I have to screenshot every of this. Insane. These have to be fake. Has to be fake. No way.
It's important I show this so you can all see the status quo between us. This is how we behaved with each other consistently whenever things were normal and fine. After a few weeks of explicit sexting, we finally found a point where we had both been intimate and revealing. We had also showed each other a sensitivity to the fact that we couldn't completely know each other in the deepest ways yet. And at that point in our relationship, I decided to have a talk with her in which I said that me and her should back away from these more explicit sexual conversations. This didn't change the status quo really at all. And after these talks, it seemed like she felt seen as a person and heard in our relationship, and she would keep engaging with her preferred status quo of constantly flirting and sexualized banter. But she was freed up from the worry that that was all that I saw in her. I bring this point up because the fact that I've been dragged so hard for the supposed way that I acted in our relationship has been all the more revolting because of it. Considering that during the relationship, I was left with the responsibility to intuit and care for all of her needs, and I sacrificed a lot for her right up until the end, and even after the fact. As I have sat quietly on this information leading up to this manifesto, allowing people to speculate wildly about me and Rhea's private life, based off of her lies and accusations. The dynamics of our relationship were complicated, but to distill it down, there were 4 main points. Firstly, I can't just have her treating me like a friend, and we were both expecting to attend to this relationship, showing up for it regularly. The second factor, neither of us like e-dating. We acknowledged that, and we
What?
decided that
And
we
you
just wanted to be
e-dated?
together in real life, or not at all.
What?
Thirdly, is that we were monogamous, and ostensibly a trade romantic couple. I don't really consider anything else to be worth recognizing. The internet flirting that everyone does is worthless to me. Without a well-established and serious expectation, it just means nothing. This is my default position with anyone that I talk to, not just Rhea. I view all e-flirting as essentially a worthless endeavor when mine or whoever's doing it, self-esteem, should be established in deeper relationships. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be flirting online. I'm just saying that using it to satisfy the intimacy that you should want in your life makes you pathetic. The fourth thing, which came later, although it is very significant, and conversations similar to the one about her identity issues or being asexual, was that I should be supportive of her, even when the things that she was saying were obviously very silly, because she had told me that she was asexual. Back then, I thought I was dealing with her being emotionally incompetent, and that she needed me to be her dom, and she was my sub. I never really thought she was actually having an identity crisis. Definitely felt silly when I promised her that I wouldn't affirm her most silly statements. But I loved her and would take on a role of our relationship of helping her interpret her feelings in a more satisfying and, importantly, true to reality way. She definitely felt embarrassed that I was talking down to her like this, but she also loved and trusted me, so she just giggled shyly. The next day, she was back to her usual friendly and flirty nature, commenting on the folds of my sweatpants or hers or some other woman's sweaty thighs and firm booty. She surely was not asexual.
Well, now's the weird stuff. Okay.
Throughout our relationship, I was often met with a reversal of what she assumed I was accusing her of. This whole thing started because I publicly vague posted at her, "Hey, you sent me a lewd that I didn't want." And she reversed that by saying I sexually harassed her. Her allegations that I downplayed her rape were also reversal. I had very clearly chastised her for her own downplaying.
Does anybody care about this?
During Goongate and following on through to my birthday on May the 22nd, and then for a few days afterwards, I was dealing with her recounting the past few weeks of interactions between us as entirely different events to how they actually were. Funnily enough, I know what this behavior from her looks like from another angle because I had curiously asked her about her relationship with another guy who I had watched her flirt with for well over a year. And she would proceed to call the individual who I had asked about a weird person and a freak, and then would add on to it saying that he DM'd her, but it was nothing weird, but also she never replied. She shit on this guy and acted like it was embarrassing to even be asked about him. But I didn't realize that she had never stopped flirting with him. To this day, they still flirt. A few weeks later, from me asking her if she'd ever actually been with him, Rhea and I were in a VC and Justical server, and the guy joined, and she welcomed him with "Hello, handsome." Within a few minutes, the two of them were joking publicly that he had DM'd her, asking for a picture of her electrocardiogram diabetes device, which she wears on a pink garter on her upper thigh. He'd been asking her for
That'd be
photos of it, and she
no?
decided to tease him publicly about it. This whole thing, her denying reality and then aggressively reversing the roles, goes further than that. I have to say, never in my life have I been more uncomfortable in conversation as when Rhea was downplaying her own rape and belittling my own. When I was telling her in May that our relationship had been disappointingly ruined by things like this, she decided to show zero reading comprehension or understanding of long conversations that me and her had already had, and she insisted that it was actually me who was downplaying her rape. This would turn into a full-blown tactic that she would use, where in the following weeks, during her public accusations against me, she did her best to emotionally weaponize the topic and find people to back her up on this disgusting and false claim. When we were still dating, leading up to Goongate, I didn't realize that she wasn't engaging with her trauma properly, even with me, her boyfriend, coaching her through it. Her talks with other people had apparently been frequent, but never actually acknowledged the emotional impact, and it seemed to me like at the time that this was, along with other stresses in her life, like her diabetes that she complained about almost every day, were causing her to become stressed and causing extreme behavior, like a reported fugue state which she had, or another time where she wanted to delete all of her social media accounts. It even contributed to me writing off plenty of her schizo rants about our relationship, or how I must have been jealous of Taxi. The only time I was jealous of her was when I started visiting Justicle's Discord Gen chat once, and noticed her aggressively flirting with multiple men, including user Weed LMAO, For the weeks leading up to the Goongate
We
event, he was
lament.
actively engaging in a delusion that her and Taxi had a deep relationship because he was the only man who had never sexualized her. She later on changed from this to admit that she knew the whole time that he had feelings for her, and around that same time she told me that she had to go have a talk with one of the boys who might have a little bit of inappropriate feelings for her. At which point I laughed, knowing that this could have been one of 20 different men. I later on realized it was about Taxi,
20
particularly because he started suicide baiting her for 3 or 4 days, which ironically she asked me to fix. So repeatedly for the past few weeks, she had incoherently and almost schizophrenically ranted to me about how Taxi never caused her problems, or she would rant that their friendship was so deep and had so much trust. Eventually these rants became a little bit more pointed, where she would directly say, relationship isn't weird, he doesn't have weird feelings for me. And just to be clear, I had never ever expressed to her that I was jealous of Taxi or that I thought their relationship was weird. It was almost as if she was engaging with me in conversations that had never happened. This reached a crescendo at Goonagate when she blurted out afterwards that Taxi, having been there during the joke that I made, was doing his best to comfort her and that he was a great guy and that I was wrong to be jealous of him. I didn't know what to say when I heard this for the first time so clearly, but I actually didn't need to respond. As she heard those words come out of her own mouth, she paused and looked confused and then went on to say out loud, but then again, you can't be jealous of us because you've always been so supportive. And this was true. I was supportive of their friendship. What Rhea didn't know was that
Thank
I'd already been dealing with
God.
a lot of her strange behavior, and despite her never having asked me to, I had actually already been giving her more space, and I had been checking in with her best friend Taxi multiple times to specifically ask about certain conversations and if she seemed to be okay with them. Taxi not only insisted that she wasn't even stressed out, he was actively encouraging me to make sexualized jokes, like the ones that
I'm
he
not
made
reading this.
often.
This is
He
like info
insisted
dump.
that these were definitely not bothering her, and that she was totally fine, wasn't acting strange, was probably just distracted by work or this or that. During Goongate, he acted to her and her DMs like he was shocked that it happened, but earlier that day, and even immediately afterwards, he reassured me that it was actually totally normal, fine and good, and that those kind of jokes could continue. He was trying his best to stress her out knowingly, to drive a wedge between us, and he had most likely been the cause for her quietly assuming that I was jealous of him for the past few weeks. Funnily enough, if you look at his public chat messages, there's a strong push from him for memes that go along the lines of saying they all want to be Taxi, or so on and so forth. I have to say that at this point in time, I essentially started to go through the emotional journey of breaking up with her. And she basically did everything that she could to walk all over my boundaries and make me as heartbroken and make that as difficult as possible. So I didn't fully manage to break up with her until the end of May. She used to bring up the topic of her rape to me multiple times, and she would do so publicly quite often, but she would never do it for extended conversations. She seemed to just do it to establish authority on the subject, quickly enjoy venting, to shit on the guy who did it, or to explain that she was having a rough
Can we go back?
authority on the subject, quickly enjoy venting.
I wanna. Oh, okay, never mind. Shoving your rifles into some. What? I want the splat from behind?
To shit on the guy who did it, or to explain that she was having a rough day. I would counsel her through these moments when she brought it up to me, but it didn't seem to be very serious, as it later ostensibly turned out to be. Often I would comfort her, and within a few minutes of talking, she would be normal again. We would continue joking, flirting, as per usual. At no point did she ever make any boundaries around her being sexualized on the internet, which is the boundary that I apparently crossed with Goonagate. Even though she did say in the past that she had trouble with this, she was referring to something that happened years ago, and as most of you know, Rhea has posted full nudes of herself from the waist up in Just Cause Not Safe for Work chat publicly for hundreds, if not thousands of people to view. She has essentially posted porn. Now, how was I ever supposed to guess that someone who would do that would also trust me not to say, hey, you're my partner and I love having you on my second monitor? The reality of the situation was that she was either manipulating me to avoid accountability in our relationship, or that she was seemingly being repeatedly triggered by excessively ruminating on her trauma during her conversations with Taxi, who was causing her to have mental breakdowns, and Taxi was telling me and everyone else that she was actually totally fine. Honestly, it was probably a bit of both of those things. When Rhea privately spoke to me about what had been happening during the end of April and early May, I realized she wasn't okay, and at the same time, I found out that Taxi had tactfully and abruptly decided to never speak to me again, and it was later revealed to have been saying that I was suicide baiting and also doing his own
Taxi?
suicide baiting, while
Okay.
also lying about me to as many people as possible, something he
Do we just block out Taxi here? Who's this? I don't know who this. Another text box just not reading.
was doing before this point as well. Taxi and Rhea have both been permanently banned from these communities for
He
doxing
doesn't
people.
read like any of the text boxes.
Something that Rhea will claim that she admonished Taxi for, but if you go back and look at the logs, she was fully on board with doxing and shaming women who she was having mild beefs with, and Taxi was aggressively attacking
Well, Rhea's
them,
on ban
perhaps in
now.
a similar way
Or
where he
I didn't
would
do it.
do anything to attack
So
me
it's not
for simply
me.
being close to Rhea. As all this complicated nonsense unfolded, I
So
used my understanding of
me?
it to guess that she was really just suffering and doing the best to make sense of things. Now that I've reorganized everything in my head, that was obviously a bad decision on my behalf, but by the end of May, I was completely emotionally drained. Back in May, her holding cold nature had me confused. I eventually wanted to break up with her, but she had made sure to step on my sensitivities and break my heart before she would even let me do that. And in response, I've been reconsidering my own insecurities, which opened me up to just being a friend to her. I dealt with that shit like a man. I grew up, I moved the fuck on, privately, quietly, and quickly, and it fucking sucked, but that is what happened. Now this leads me to another massive misunderstanding by almost everyone, and especially Rhea's pathetic simps, who have enjoyed repeating it over and over and over. It's the idea that she ever said no to me. She never once pushed for me and her to just be friends. Her version of this was just to be patronizing at times, saying that we just had a crush, which I guess is technically true, although I would say that despite us getting repeated crushes on each other, we also had something more, and she would act like we did a lot. We looped over and over on the relationship conversation, and every single time, I just had to reassure her that I wasn't interested in the relationship, I was interested in something more. She would be happy by the end of every conversation, but later on, bring it back up. She could have left at any point, and instead, she chose to torture me, and then leak logs, portraying that her complaining about the relationship was her stating that we weren't in any relationship. I alone declared that me and her would be friends. It was a massive moment for me that I had...
It's horrible quality. And that makes, what is this? Unmedicated ADHD boy. I just get very excited. Now I'm medicated.
realized that I wanted her in my life, even in the small ways.
God, no way.
And I'd realized that I treasured her so much that I was happy to suppress any romantic feelings for her to protect that friendship.
Jesus
I told her that if she ever noticed a cloud over my head, that we both knew that maybe it was because one of us was missing the romance that we used to have. I told her that on this singular issue, I wouldn't be open with her to avoid the fact that she might end up feeling the need to comfort me and therefore nurture some fantasy that we would ever be together in any way that wasn't friendship. I also told her I would have to ask her not to flirt with me and for her to have boundaries that enforced this friendship on her side too. I'm sure by this point, it's not too hard to understand that she was ecstatic to hear this from me. What for me was a moment of personal growth was for her the idea of being recognised by her now ex-boyfriend as someone who was worth having around no matter what. That I would sacrifice daily for her, daily for the struggle, resisting her irresistible beauty in order to maintain our realistic friendship. Well, the first thing she did after me coming to her with this was to proceed to put her irresistible beauty to work. For the following 2 weeks, she was totally infatuated with me, fully engaged and doing everything that she could to turn me on and try to make me feel like I was a special and irresistible man to her. At first, I was feeling very grounded in myself, like a man who had just found a foothold in life. I was still reeling from the heartbreak that she had caused me in May, but after a few weeks of moving into June, I had started to reinforce those boundaries on the friendship that I had made. And in response to this, she would start to weaponize her affection against me, almost as if to tell me that at any moment, our close and sometimes excessive intimacy would be downgraded to a surface-level politeness of passing strangers. This somewhat worked over those 2 weeks. She was making it difficult to emotionally move on from her, but ultimately, it no longer affected my decision-making or ruined my days. I just want to touch on how comically transparent a lot of her manipulation was. It was like a Sunday morning cartoon villain. When I would mention that the flirting was too much, she would give a little huff. And then, within 15 minutes or so, she would think of a way to insist that it was actually me flirting too hard. Maybe sometimes I did flirt back with her, but, for example, she would say that because I talked about my plans to travel the world, which I had often and had nothing to do with her, I was flirting too hard. Another time, it was something she actually leaked to you all that was a completely incoherent response from her to what was happening at the time. She would make this statement the same day as her talking about how horny she was and how some League of Legends or Valorant gameplay made her squirt in her panties. That was literally the way she would speak to me. And the kind of things where I would say, hey, that's going a little too far. You know that I'm trying to just see you as a friend. I know that some of this sounds like she was struggling with our breakup, and it was that, but it was also calculated and manipulative. And she very easily managed to avoid taking the time to consider my feelings by explaining away past events that might have given me reason to feel a certain kind of way. She would do this in advance. After a few weeks of her aggressively flirting with me, despite the rules of our friendship, she adapted her strategy to spend 2 days giving me the cold shoulder, but also still spending hours in VC with me or watching my stream. I think this worked against her ultimately. She really finally, for the first time in months, had time away from me being a caretaker for her feelings. I gently called out what she was doing, referencing how we used to check in with each other. It was a little ritual from when we were dating, a habit, and now a way of saying, hey, I see you, I still care for you, but I'm not playing that game. Eventually she would warm back up to me, but I think she'd spent those 2 days really coming to terms with the fact that our romantic relationship was ending. We were still hanging out for 3 to 6 hours every day, and one night, after I'd gone to sleep, she called me crying. The call was short, and she never explained why it happened, but she did say that it was all my fault. I think she was just upset that we'd broken up. 3 days later, I asked her to call me so we could talk about it. She'd been giving me the cold shoulder again, but also pretending not to, showing up on the Discord, to my stream, and whatnot. I once again had to check in with her and letting her know I noticed that she was struggling. She pretends like there's nothing going on, and I assure her that her behaviour change is noticeable and that we've never sorted out why she was crying 3 nights ago. She becomes patronising, saying that we already talked about it. I corrected her that we had talked about it a little bit, but she hadn't clarified at all what happened, and that I just wanted to know if she was struggling so she could speak to someone about it, and that included me. Especially on this issue, because it included me, she should try and be open. On top of that, I let her know that there are definitely emotional issues that she should have to confront herself to decide how she really feels about them, instead of leaning on others and having her emotions dictated back to her. As someone who was very close to her, I can tell you all that the thing that she does very regularly is allow others to dictate her emotions back to her and decide how she feels based on people telling her how she should feel. In response to this, she started to pick up a whole different persona of like a girl boss, telling me that she doesn't have to tell me anything, to which I was very understanding and teased her a little bit, kind of just letting her know that I had just told her that she might have to deal with her own problems. She tried to escalate this argument over and over, as can be seen in the DMs of that night. She spends 5 minutes telling me false tales, she spends 5 minutes pretending she didn't, and then 5 minutes calling me a coward who was just upset about her talking to other men and that I was too afraid to admit it. I had to speak to her like a patient parent. I was pretty emotionally detached, right up until the point where eventually I responded that the only thing that I would ever refrain from being open with her about was that sometimes I missed the feeling that me and her used to have when we were dating, which is a very significant statement for me to make, considering our past and present relationship at the time. When I said that, she scoffed in my face and hung up on me, and I've never spoken to her again, except she ambushed me in a group call over a week later. She had been lying about me for days leading up to that call. She'd probably been doing so for weeks privately before that call, and immediately after that call, she went on to have a massive and public voice call lying about me. She didn't just want attention, she wanted to be wanted. And if I let her, she would pull me right back into that emotional grey zone, where my role was to be available, affirming, and even aroused by her, but where I was never supposed to expect anything back. And if I didn't play along, she iced me out, then the whole connection could be downgraded to surface level politeness, and that should scare me. It didn't scare me, and I honestly had no idea that she was about to publicly destroy me. I had no idea that she was out here recruiting Cyclone and Taxi and spreading rumors to anyone about me. I didn't realize that they were prepared to pull from events covering 3 months in order to undermine what had happened between me and her, which was still a treasured relationship to me at the time. It's actually pretty fucked up that Goongate, I had just spent 6 weeks interpreting her needs, which I believe I did correctly, only to have her browbeat me on the rules that she made up after the fact. That I had to be the one to find a way out of our romantic relationship because she would minimize her own rape as well as my own, as well as undermining our sincere and arguably very safe and trustworthy relationship, because she also followed that up by specifically attacking my greatest insecurities to try to rattle me and break my heart enough to hopefully make it look like it was all my fault and remove any accountability from herself. It's just disgusting. She was free to change her mind and tell me that we would never be together at any point, but she couldn't face any kind of responsibility, even for that. Her only interactions with boundaries would pretend like they didn't exist or misuse them to get whatever she wanted at the time. A perfect example, and probably the one that broke the camel's back, is this image. In the fallout of me vague posting to her about it, she was telling everyone that me having this image was an act of perversion. Then, contradicting it days later, she posted it to a VC, which allegedly had more than 50 people. I'm told she literally said out loud, I would send this to my grandma, it's so innocent. She was doing this in order to insist that she wasn't knowingly sending me thirst trap when I had told her not to. Then, she showed and lied about mine and her DMs at the time. Why did she delete it when I didn't ask her to? If this was okay to send to a friend, why did she delete it from our DMs? In fact, she never told you all about the conversation I had with her about it the next day.
Another DMs girl. Oh my god.
Maybe she did know it was something that I would obviously find attractive, which obviously also means she knew it would play with my emotions, considering we had recently broken up. I think she did know all of this. We hadn't talked about her ECG at all that day. This thirst trap selfie came completely out of the blue. Despite her thinking it's perverted that I have this photo saved, she has shared this photo publicly with 50 or more people, including a Discord moderator who defended her, who also has it saved. And he was shortly removed as moderator and permanently banned from the servers me and him operated in. Cyclone's leaks show him and Taxi had a 4-hour call with Rhea. In that call, he saved the picture that she was angry at me for saving, but also that she was okay with showing to everyone. Cyclone both agrees with her that it's fine to send that picture around, but he also uses paint to scribble over his own saved version of it so that he can publicly post it in the server he moderated for, as an attempt to show that he is even more respectful of her than I am, even though he is in that moment actively leaking her private photos and information, even though I suppose she had already leaked it earlier and been mocked for it. The hilarious part here is that from his own censoring of the image, you can see that his saved version of it is not censored, only the version that he decides to share with the rest of us. Rhea, Cyclone, and Taxi all like to say that I was complaining of some sort of conspiracy against me, which is not true. I never complained of this. I simply was spending my days trying to look for a way to calm her down and rebuild the bridge with her. Cyclone had drunkenly shown himself to be odd, and when he was spending days talking to me about Rhea, he publicly threw me under the bus suddenly. When questioned on it, it turns out that he'd been reading Machiavelli's The Prince recently, and he'd thought that he'd learned how to manipulate people purely for his own self-interest. This was very obvious. He's not built like that. For the next few days, he repeatedly claimed innocence.
Is there proof of this?
That no one pressed him on, and then he clownishly showed us evidence of him doing those things that he insisted never happened.
Proof of this? He says it's really true. He read The Prince and it did.
He had actually done those things that he was trying to defend against. He revealed that he was actively ruining any attempt for anyone to help privately settle this business between me and Rhea. And he went on to reveal that Rhea and Taxi had in fact been incompetently doing some conspiracy-like activities. You can all see from my public logs that I never mentioned anything to do with any co-conspirators of any sort. This is another topic that we can go over in another video, but in summary, I thought that Rhea was just upset and would come around. I knew that weird simps would try to use the situation to farm her for sexual attention, and for that, I just decided to keep everything as private as possible.
Yeah.
I think that essentially covers the whole drama, and in reflection, I learned a few things about myself. I'm proud of the way I handled the relationship and even the fallout. It's been over a month since it happened, and despite people talking about it non-stop, it wasn't until almost immediately prior to this video's release that I even revealed that me and her were a couple. Because of this, I've been attacked by many unhinged simps, as well as having hundreds of people saying that I've done horrible things. I sacrificed saying anything against her throughout that entire attack, and it wasn't until she left the space when I felt like I should publicly say anything, which was just like 2 screenshots countering her main claims. I don't think half of you even knew a quarter of the things that you were all speculating on as a fact, and you needed to try to stand over me about my personal life, which also shows you're probably the kind of losers who can't even conceive of the kind of relationship that I actually did build a foundation for.
In my head, I'm like, base?
As far as Rhea is concerned, she's also going into the certain class of person who will probably live their entire lives in a web of lies, and the luxury of having all of her failures covered up by a shallow and consistent need for reassurance and attention. There are millions of losers in this world who ignore the consequences of their behavior and force their own out of control emotions onto the world and other people and shape reality. And I regret letting people like that into my life. It's disgusting. But I won't let this chapter of my life be one where I come out at a net loss or even breaking even. I've grown from this and I am better than I was before it. And I'm better than the freaks who tried to hold me up to their own hypocritical standards and then cut me down. They can cope endlessly with each other, and I will move forward, letting you all see the truth of exactly who I am. I'm just sorry that I did it with Rhea, who underneath it all is not at all the person she presented herself to be to me. In closing, I just want to do a big shout out to Dung Devil, Spinboy, Wolfgang, Stasi, and even Yoga and Androida, as well as anyone else who had otherwise normal conversations with girly Rhea, and those led to her spurging out.
Laughing heart. Your life is your life. Don't let it be clubbed into dank submission. Be on the watch. There are ways out. There is light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them, take them. You can't beat death, but you can beat death in life. Sometimes the more often you learn to do it, the more light there will be. Your life is your life. Know it while you have it. You are marvelous. The gods wait to delight in you. That's a beauty.
Okay.
What do you think about that, Kenny?
It was extremely boring. Done with this. Got nothing. That was boring as horrible. Horrible. Rian?
You should ping her and get her in here.
She's probably asleep. I mean, it's over.